Why are you a black man driving around here?
Sir, I was just...
Did I ask you to speak? Silence. Get out of the car. Immediately.
Officer, I did nothing wrong.
I said get out! Get
He
out
got
of the vehicle!
Calm. Hands outstretched.
Kneel down on the ground where you belong!
He knelt, slowly, without a trace of fear. Then a hard slap to his face. A hand grabbed his neck, pushed him forward. His face slammed into the mud. Cold, wet.
Stay still, black dog! No resistance allowed!
Mud in his mouth, mud in his eyes, but his breathing remained steady. Because the police officer standing above him had no idea that he had just pressed the face of a 4-star general to the ground. And what happened next would destroy everything that police officer had ever built. Let me take you back, 30 minutes before all of that. The sun was sinking behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. That golden September light was pouring through the trees along Route 12 in Ridgemont County, Virginia. This is the kind of place where time moves slow. Split-rail fences line the roads. Old oaks hang over 2-lane highways like canopies. The air smells like fresh-cut grass and honeysuckle. And right through the middle of all that beauty, a dark green Chevy Tahoe was cruising at 53 in a 55 zone. Behind the wheel sat Isaac Harper, 46 years old, clean-shaven, navy polo shirt, khaki pants pressed sharp, reading glasses tucked into his collar. He looked like a college professor heading to a weekend dinner, maybe an accountant, maybe a church deacon. He looked like nobody special. And that was entirely by design. Because Isaac Harper was a retired 4-star general of the United States Army, the youngest black man to ever reach that rank. 3 combat tours, 2 Bronze Stars, a presidential commendation framed on his office wall in D.C. And right now, he served as chair of the National Commission on Law Enforcement Oversight, a federal body with one very specific power: the authority to investigate, restructure, or shut down any police department that violated civil rights. But you wouldn't know any of that by looking at him. His phone sat in a hands-free cradle. Colonel Denise Ashford's voice came through the speaker, warm and slightly impatient. "Isaac, if you're late to this dinner, I'm ordering without you." He smiled. "Denise, I survived Fallujah. I think I can handle a country road." "Fallujah didn't have catfish. This place does." "Save me a seat. 20 minutes. He hung up and let the quiet settle back in. Country radio played low. The window was cracked 2 inches. Warm air carried the smell of pine and damp earth. It had rained earlier. The road was dry, but the shoulders were soft. Puddles sat in the low spots. Mud collected where gravel met grass. In his glove box, neatly organized in a manila envelope, sat 3 documents. His military ID with 4 stars visible, his commission credentials with the Department of Justice seal, and a letter on White House letterhead authorizing his review of law enforcement agencies in the region. He was here to quietly assess the Ridgemont County Sheriff's Department. No sirens, no entourage, just a man in a Tahoe with his eyes open. A doe and her fawn stepped onto the road ahead. Isaac stopped, waited, watched them cross. Unhurried, the fawn stumbling once before finding its footing. He smiled, patient, in no rush. That's who Isaac Harper was. Now let me show you who was watching him. Half a mile back, behind a faded billboard, sat a Ridgemont County patrol car. Sergeant Dale Swanson was finishing a gas station burrito and complaining. 3 hours of that sensitivity garbage, sitting in a room learning how to be polite to people who can't follow basic instructions. Deputy Tyler Braddock sat in the passenger seat, scrolling his phone. He half laughed, the way you do when your boss says something wrong, but you don't want trouble. Swanson crumpled the wrapper. 18 years on this force. Nobody tells me how to do my job. Then he saw it. Isaac's Tahoe cruising past. Clean, dark green, DC plates. His eyes narrowed. Nice ride for this part of town. He ran the plates. Clean, DC address. No warrants, nothing. But that didn't matter. Not to Swanson. DC plates out here? Let's see what we got. He pulled out, flipped the lights. Isaac saw the flash in his rear view, red and blue, slicing through the golden evening like a blade. The piece was over. He pulled onto the muddy shoulder, the only spot wide enough on this narrow road. Tires sank into soft ground, engine off, dome light on. Both hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2. He'd done this before. Not as a general, as a black man in America. The crackle of a police radio replaced the crickets. The warm air turned cold. Swanson took his time getting out of the patrol car. That's the first thing you need to understand. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't responding to a call. He wasn't chasing a suspect. He had nowhere to be and nothing to go on. But he wanted Isaac to wait. That was the game. Let the driver sit there with the lights flashing, heart rate climbing, wondering what's coming. It's a power move, and Swanson had been doing it for 18 years. He adjusted his belt, checked his reflection in the side mirror. Then he walked toward the Tahoe with the kind of slow, heavy steps that said one thing: I own this road. The flashlight came first. A blinding white beam straight through the driver's side window, right into Isaac's face. Isaac didn't flinch. He kept his hands exactly where they were, 10 and 2, eyes forward. Swanson leaned into the window frame, close enough that Isaac could smell the burrito on his breath. License and registration. Where are you headed tonight? Not good evening, not sir. Just a command wrapped in a question that wasn't really a question. Isaac's voice came out calm, measured, like a man who had briefed 4-star generals and presidents and wasn't about to be rattled by a county sergeant with a flashlight. Good evening, officer. My license is in my wallet, left pocket. May I reach for it? Swanson didn't acknowledge the courtesy, didn't say thank you, didn't say please. Just get it. Slowly. Isaac reached into his left pocket with 2 fingers, pulled out his wallet, removed his civilian driver's license, and handed it over. Every motion deliberate, every motion visible. Swanson snatched it, tilted it under the flashlight, saw the DC address. His lip curled. Long way from home. What brings you out here? Visiting for work. What kind of work? The question hung in the air. It wasn't casual. It was loaded, the way a man loads a trap before he sets it. Swanson's eyes were already scanning the interior of the vehicle, the overnight bag on the back seat, the manila envelope in the glove box, the phone in the cradle. Government work, Isaac said. Nothing more, nothing less. Swanson stared at him for a long 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked back to his patrol car without a word. He ran the license, and here's what came back. Nothing. No warrants, no priors, no arrests, no tickets, not even a parking violation. Isaac Harper's record was cleaner than a surgical tray. Any reasonable officer would have handed the license back and said, "Have a nice evening." Any officer following protocol would have let this man go. But Swanson sat in his patrol car for 4 full minutes. 4 minutes of nothing. Just sitting there, letting the lights flash, letting Isaac wait, letting the tension build like pressure in a pipe. Braddock glanced at the laptop screen. He saw the clean record. He looked at Swanson. "Sarge, he's clean. Nothing on him." Swanson didn't respond. He was looking at Isaac's silhouette through the windshield, thinking, deciding. Then he got out and walked back to the Tahoe. Isaac expected his license back, He expected a nod, maybe even an apology for the inconvenience, though he'd learned long ago not to expect apologies on roads like this. Instead, Swanson said 5 words that changed everything. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." Isaac's hands stayed on the wheel. His voice stayed level. "May I ask why, officer?" "I said step out. Don't make me ask again." Swanson's right hand drifted to his belt. Not to his weapon, just to his belt. But the message was clear. This wasn't a request. Isaac opened the door slowly, stepped out onto the muddy shoulder. His shoes sank an inch into the wet earth. He rose to his full height, 6'2", broad shoulders, straight back. The posture of a man who had stood on military stages in front of thousands. Swanson had to look up at him, and he didn't like that, not one bit. "Hands on the hood, now." Isaac placed both palms flat on the warm metal of the Tahoe's hood. Mud was already on his shoes. The evening air had cooled. Somewhere behind them, the crickets tried to start up again, but couldn't quite find the rhythm. "Sergeant, can you tell me the reason for this stop?" Swanson moved behind him. Close. Too close. "Your vehicle matches a description." There was no description, there was no report, there was no bulletin. The narrator wants you to know that, because Swanson sure wasn't going to tell you. He began the pat-down. Not a professional pat-down. Not the kind they teach at the academy. Efficient, respectful, methodical. This was something else. Swanson squeezed Isaac's arms like he was testing meat at a butcher shop. He shoved him harder against the vehicle. Isaac's chest hit the hood. His polo shirt dragged across the dusty surface. Swanson patted down his legs, his waist, reached into his pockets and pulled them inside out. A stick of gum fell into the mud. Isaac said nothing. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on the tree line ahead. He breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way he'd learned in ranger school 30 years ago. Deputy Braddock stood 6 feet behind them. His body camera was rolling. The small red light blinked steadily in the fading daylight. He watched Swanson shove Isaac against the vehicle a second time, harder, and his stomach turned. He knew this was wrong. He felt it in his chest. But he didn't say a word. Because the last deputy who questioned Swanson got transferred to overnight dispatch for 3 months, and Braddock had a baby on the way. So he stood there, and he watched, and the camera kept rolling. Across the road, about 40 yards away, Pastor Elaine Crawford was sitting on her front porch. She had a glass of sweet tea in her hand and a Bible in her lap. She'd been watching the sunset, the same sunset Isaac had driven through minutes earlier. Then she saw the lights, red and blue flashing through the trees, and she saw the silhouette of a black man being pressed against the hood of his own vehicle by a white officer on a muddy roadside. She'd seen this before, 3 times in the last 2 years, right on this same stretch of road. Different men, same officer, same routine. She set down her tea, picked up her phone, and hit record. Her hands were steady, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she learned that shaking hands still hold phones, and phones hold truth. Back at the Tahoe, Swanson wasn't done. "I'm going to search this vehicle." Isaac turned his head slightly, just enough to make eye contact. "I do not consent to a search, Sergeant." Swanson stepped closer, close enough that his breath hit the back of Isaac's neck. "You don't get to tell me what you consent to. I have probable cause." "What probable cause?" Swanson didn't answer. He walked to the driver's side door, which was still open, and began tearing through the vehicle. Center console, opened, rifled, slammed shut. Back seat, the overnight bag unzipped and dumped. Clothes spilled onto the leather seats. A toothbrush rolled onto the floor. Then the glove box. He found the manila envelope. thick, official-looking. He pulled it out, opened the flap. Inside were 3 documents: a military ID with 4 stars clearly embossed, a commission credential with the Department of Justice seal in gold, and a letter on White House letterhead with the signature at the bottom. Swanson looked at them. He held them in his hands. He flipped through them the way a man flips through junk mail, fast, careless, uninterested. Then he tossed the envelope onto the passenger seat and kept searching. He didn't read the name. He didn't see the stars. He didn't recognize the seal. Or maybe he did, and simply didn't care. Either way, that moment, that exact moment, is the one that will end his career. Because he had the truth in his hands, and he threw it away. Swanson slammed the Tahoe's door shut. He'd searched every inch of that vehicle and found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no contraband, not even an expired registration. Nothing. And that made it worse. Because now Swanson had a problem. He'd pulled a man over for no reason, searched his car without consent, put hands on him during a pat-down that had no justification. A smart man would have stopped here, handed back the license, said, "You're free to go," driven away before the hole got any deeper. But Dale Swanson wasn't a smart man. He was a proud one, and proud men don't back down. They double down. He walked back to Isaac, who was still standing by the hood with his palms flat on the metal, patient, waiting, like a man who had all the time in the world. That patience, that unshakable, bone-deep calm, was the thing Swanson couldn't stand. He'd dealt with angry suspects, crying suspects, suspects who screamed and cursed and spat. But a man who looked at him with steady eyes and zero fear, that felt like defiance. And defiance, to Dale Swanson, was the one thing he could never tolerate. "On your knees." Isaac turned his head. "Sergeant, this is unnecessary. I've cooperated with everything you've asked." "I said on your knees. Now. Right there." Swanson pointed to the muddy shoulder, the exact spot where rainwater had pooled into a shallow stretch of brown slush and wet clay. Isaac looked down at the mud, then back at Swanson. "Sergeant, did I stutter? Knees. Now." Isaac lowered himself, slowly. One knee first, then the other. The wet earth swallowed his knees instantly. Cold brown water soaked through his khakis. He could feel the grit, tiny stones, broken roots, clay, pressing into his skin through the fabric. The cold crept up his thighs. A smell rose from the disturbed earth, iron and rot and rain. He kept his back straight, hands at his sides, eyes forward. Even on his knees, he carried himself like a man standing at full attention. Swanson circled him, slow, the way a dog circles something it's about to bite. His boots squelched in the mud with each step. He stopped directly in front of Isaac and looked down. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Isaac raised his eyes, calm, steady, unwavering. And Swanson saw something in those eyes that made his blood boil. Not anger, not fear, not submission, patience. This man was waiting, not enduring, waiting. Like the ending of this story had already been written, and Swanson just hadn't read it yet. That look is what broke him. Swanson's hand came fast, open palm, full force, straight across Isaac's left cheek. The sound cracked through the evening air like a branch snapping in a storm. It echoed off the trees. Pastor Crawford flinched on her porch, but kept her phone steady. Isaac's head snapped to the right, his body swayed, but he didn't fall. He turned back, slowly, looked at Swanson again. Same eyes, same calm. a red mark rising on his cheek, hot and raw against his dark skin. He said nothing, and that silence was louder than any scream. "You think you're tough?" Swanson's voice was shaking now, not with authority, with something uglier, something out of control. "Huh? You think you're better than me?" He grabbed the back of Isaac's neck, thick fingers digging into muscle, shoved him forward, hard, and Isaac's face went straight into the mud. Cheek first, then his mouth, then his nose. Cold, wet earth pressed against his skin, filling the corners of his lips, sliding along his eyelids, grip scraping against his teeth. "Stay down." Swanson pressed harder on the back of Isaac's head, pushing him deeper. "This is where you belong." Deputy Braddock took one step forward. His voice came out thin. "Sarge, maybe we should—" "Back up, rookie. I got this." Braddock stopped. His body camera was still rolling. The red light blinked. 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 Isaac lay in the mud, face down, arms at his sides. He didn't struggle. He didn't resist. He breathed. In through the nose, slow, controlled. Out through the mouth, steady, measured. Military breathing. The kind they teach you when every instinct screams to move, to fight, to run. He'd used it in Fallujah when mortar rounds shook the ground beneath his boots. He'd used it in Kandahar when a convoy hit an IED and the sky turned black. But this was different. In Fallujah, the enemy wore no uniform. In Kandahar, the threat came from shadows. Here, on this quiet Virginia road, the threat wore a badge and swore an oath to protect and serve. That, more than the mud, more than the slap, was the thing that cut deepest. Swanson stood over him, breathing hard. He put his boot next to Isaac's head, not on it, but close enough. Mud splashed against Isaac's ear. "You know what I think? I think you're running something. Guys like you always are, fancy DC plates in your government work." He spat the last two words like they tasted bad. "I've seen 100 of you, all the same." Isaac's polo shirt was ruined, soaked brown from chest to collar, mud in the lines around his eyes, in his close-cropped hair, between his lips. But his breathing never changed, steady as a clock. Swanson grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Non-compliant male on Route 12, potentially dangerous, requesting backup." Every word a lie. Non-compliant, while the man lay motionless. Potentially dangerous, while his hands rested open at his sides. The radio crackled. Backup en route. Swanson told Isaac to stay face down. Then he walked back toward the Tahoe, just to make the point that he could leave a man in the dirt and go about his business. That's when Isaac's phone rang. The screen lit up in the cradle. The name glowed bright. Colonel Ashford. Swanson looked at it, looked back at Isaac in the mud, picked up the phone, and rejected the call. 30 miles away, at a restaurant in Charlottesville, Colonel Denise Ashford stared at her phone. Isaac was never late. In 20 years, through deployments, through Pentagon briefings past midnight, he had never once failed to show up when he said he would. She called again. Rejected again. Her stomach dropped. She didn't panic. Ashford didn't do panic. But she moved. Fast. She called the Department of Defense Operations Center on a secure line, identified herself, requested an immediate GPS trace on General Harper's phone. "Ma'am, what's the nature of the concern?" "The general is traveling alone in a rural area. He's unreachable and overdue. That doesn't happen. Not with him." Within 3 minutes, she had coordinates. Route 12, Ridgemont County. Stationary. One more call. Virginia State Police. She identified herself, identified General Harper, gave his location. "There may be a local law enforcement encounter in progress. I need units there now, and I need you to understand exactly who you're sending them for. The gears began to turn, fast. Back on Route 12, a second patrol car pulled up. Officer Trent Calloway stepped out. He saw Isaac first, face down, mud-covered, motionless. "Dale, what's going on here?" Swanson answered fast. Too fast. Suspect was belligerent, refused to comply, possible narcotics, had to put him down. Calloway looked at Isaac, a 46-year-old man in a mud-soaked polo shirt. Silent. Still. Not a trace of resistance. He didn't buy it. But he didn't say anything either. Swanson ordered Isaac to get up. Isaac rose. Slowly. The mud clung to him like a second skin. It dripped from his chin, smeared across his forehead. One eye half closed, where clay had dried against his eyelid. He stood to his full height, 6'2". Even covered in filth, even with a handprint burning red on his cheek, he stood like a man who could not be broken. He wiped one streak of mud from his eye with the back of his hand. Then he spoke. Low, controlled, every word placed with the precision of a man who had commanded armies. "Sergeant, I'm going to give you one opportunity to de-escalate this situation. When you find out who I am, you are going to wish you had taken it." Swanson laughed, short, ugly. "Is that a threat? You threatening a law enforcement officer?" He stepped closer, close enough that Isaac could see the veins in his neck. Isaac didn't blink. Across the road, Crawford was crying. But her hands stayed locked on that phone, recording every second. And behind Swanson, Braddock reached up and touched his body camera. Not to turn it off, just to check. To make sure the red light was still blinking. Because somewhere deep in his gut, Tyler Braddock already knew. This footage was going to matter more than anything he'd ever recorded in his life. Then they heard it. Not sirens, not yet. Something else. The low, heavy rumble of engines, big engines, coming fast from the north end of Route 12. Headlights appeared through the tree line. Not one set, 3. Moving in formation, tight, precise, military precision. 3 black SUVs rounded the curve and bore down on the scene like a freight train made of tinted glass and federal authority. Their headlights blazed white-hot against the darkness, swallowing the red and blue of Swanson's patrol car like they were nothing. Swanson squinted. What the hell? The SUVs stopped in the triangle formation around the scene. Doors opened simultaneously. Men and women in dark suits and tactical vests stepped out. Earpieces, credentials on lanyards. The kind of people who don't introduce themselves, they announce themselves. At the same moment, a Virginia State Police cruiser screamed around the bend from the opposite direction. Lights and sirens, full speed. It skidded to a stop on the gravel, and a captain stepped out. Tall, gray-haired, already furious. "Sergeant Swanson, step away from that man, now!" Swanson's head whipped between the SUVs and the state cruiser. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I said step away, hands where I can see them." Swanson took 2 steps back, confused, lost, like a man who just woke up in a room he doesn't recognize. The lead SUV's passenger door opened. Colonel Denise Ashford stepped out. Dark suit, credentials visible on her chest. Her shoes hit the mud, and she didn't care. She walked straight to Isaac, past Swanson, past Calloway, past Braddock, like they didn't exist. She saw his face, the mud, the swollen cheek, the red mark shaped like a hand, the dirt caked in his hair, his eyes, his mouth. Her jaw tightened so hard you could see the muscle jump beneath her skin. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a white handkerchief, pressed it into Isaac's hand. He took it, wiped his face slowly, methodically, the way he did everything, deliberate, unhurried, precise. Mud came away in long brown streaks against the white cloth. Then Ashford turned to Swanson. Her voice carried across the entire road, clear as a church bell on a Sunday morning. Every person on that roadside heard every syllable. Sergeant, the man whose face you just shoved into the mud is General Isaac Harper, United States Army, 4 stars, retired. He currently serves as chair of the National Commission on Law Enforcement Oversight, the federal body that reviews departments like yours for civil rights compliance. She paused. Let it land. He is here, in your county, because your department is under preliminary review, and you just gave him all the evidence he'll ever need. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a space, it crushes it. The crickets didn't sing, the radios didn't crackle, even the wind stopped, as if the entire Virginia countryside was holding its breath. Swanson's face went white. Not pale, white. The blood drained from his skin so fast you could almost hear it leaving. His hands started to shake. His lips moved, but no words came. I didn't. How was I supposed to? Isaac finished wiping his face, folded the handkerchief neatly, looked at Swanson, not with anger, not with triumph, with something worse. The calm, steady gaze of a man who had already decided what comes next. You had my credentials in your hand, Sergeant. You chose not to read them. You didn't stop me because of who I am. You stopped me because of what I look like. He paused. And that is exactly what I'm here to investigate. Deputy Braddock stepped forward. His face was pale as paper. His voice was quiet but firm. The voice of a man who had just chosen a side. My body cam has everything, sir. All of it. Every second. Calloway moved away from Swanson. 2 full steps. Physical distance. The kind that says, I don't know this man. I was never with this man. Swanson stood alone. In the mud. Under the lights. Surrounded by federal agents and state police. And the consequences of every choice he'd made in the last 45 minutes. The state police captain stepped forward. Professional. Final. Sergeant Dale Swanson, you are being placed under arrest pending investigation. Charges include unlawful detention, assault on a federal official, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, filing a false report, and illegal search and seizure. He took Swanson's badge, unclipped it from his chest, took his weapon, removed it from the holster. Then he turned Swanson around and put handcuffs on his wrists. The metal clicked, shut, tight, cold. Swanson was walked to the back of the state police cruiser. The door opened. He was guided inside, head ducked, hands behind his back, onto the same hard plastic seat where he'd put hundreds of people over 18 years. The door shut. And the man who made others kneel in the dirt was now sitting in the cage, looking out through the same steel mesh he'd locked so many faces behind. The mud on the general's face was already drying in the night air. But it didn't matter, because that mud, every grain of it, was now evidence. And it was going to bury Dale Swanson deeper than he'd ever pushed anyone down. The news reached Sheriff Glenn Adler at 9:47 p.m. He was at a fundraiser. Country club, white tablecloths, a glass of bourbon in one hand and a handshake in the other. The kind of evening where powerful men remind each other how powerful they are. His phone buzzed once, then again. Then it didn't stop. The mayor, the county board chair, a reporter from the Charlottesville Daily, another reporter from Richmond, then a number he didn't recognize, which turned out to be a producer from CNN. He stepped into the hallway, read the first message, then the second. By the third, the bourbon in his stomach had turned to acid. his sergeant had just assaulted a 4-star general, a federal official, on camera. Adler drove to the station doing 90 on back roads. His tie was loosened. His forehead was damp. He was already writing the narrative in his head, the one where this was a mistake, an anomaly, a regrettable incident involving one rogue officer. He sat at his desk and typed a statement. 3 drafts, each one more careful than the last. The final version called Swanson a dedicated officer who made a serious error in judgment. It called the incident isolated. It expressed deep concern and promised a thorough internal review. Standard playbook: minimize, contain, survive. Then he made the call he thought would fix everything. He dialed General Harper's number directly. He'd gotten it from the state police report. He planned to be humble, apologetic, offer a personal meeting, resolve this quietly, keep it out of the press, man to man. Colonel Ashford answered instead. Sheriff Adler, the general is unavailable. Ma'am, I just want to express how deeply. Let me stop you right there. Ashford's voice could have frozen a river in July. The general doesn't negotiate with departments under investigation. You will be hearing from the commission, formally, through official channels. I suggest you retain legal counsel. The line went dead. Adler sat in his chair for a long time after that, staring at his phone, because he'd just realized something that changed everything. This wasn't about Swanson anymore. The commission now had grounds to escalate the preliminary review into a full pattern or practice investigation of his entire department, every complaint, every use of force report, every settlement, every file he'd buried, every problem he'd swept under the rug for the last 12 years. Dale Swanson hadn't just ended his own career tonight. He might have ended all of theirs. While Adler was spiraling, Deputy Tyler Braddock was sitting in a plastic chair at the Virginia State Police field office, alone, under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry bees. He'd driven himself there, voluntarily. Nobody asked him to come, nobody ordered him. He gave a full statement, calm, detailed, methodical. He described every moment of the stop, from the second Swanson lit up Isaac's Tahoe to the second the handcuffs clicked. He confirmed there was no probable cause, no matching vehicle description, no reason for the stop, the pat-down, the search, or anything that followed. Then he went further. I've been riding with Sergeant Swanson for 8 months, he said. In that time, I have personally witnessed him conduct similar stops targeting Black and Latino drivers at least 12 times. He named dates, he named locations. He described patterns, the same stretch of Route 12, the same excuses, the same escalation. His body camera footage was submitted on a USB drive. He placed it on the table and slid it across to the investigator. It's all there, he said. Every second. The slap, the mud, everything. That footage, 43 minutes of unbroken high-definition video with crystal clear audio, would become the most important piece of evidence in the case. And it existed because a 26-year-old deputy with a baby on the way decided that silence was no longer something he could afford. Across town, Pastor Elaine Crawford was sitting at her kitchen table. Her phone was in front of her. The video was still on the screen, 6 minutes and 12 seconds of footage that would change the country. She uploaded it at 10:15 p.m. Simple caption, no hashtags, no drama, just the truth, what she saw, where she saw it, and the name of the officer involved. By midnight, it had 2 million views. By 6 a.m., 10 million. By noon the next day, every major news network in America was running the footage. The image, a decorated general, face pressed into the mud by a county sergeant, played on loop across cable news, social media, and front pages from coast to coast. The hashtag General Harper trended #1 nationally for 3 straight days. Civil rights organizations issued statements within hours. Legal experts broke down the charges on live television. Commentators called it the most clear-cut case of racial profiling caught on camera in a decade. The video showed everything. Isaac's cooperation, Swanson's contempt, the slap, the mud, the absolute, undeniable contrast between a man who had every right to fight back and an officer who had no right to do what he did. And the world watched. All of it. The Department of Justice moved faster than anyone expected. 48 hours after Crawford's video went viral, the Civil Rights Division announced a formal pattern or practice investigation into the Ridgemont County Sheriff's Department. Not a review, not an inquiry, the kind that ends careers and rewrites rules from the ground up. 12 federal investigators arrived on a Monday morning with government laptops, legal pads, and subpoena power that could crack open any file in the building. They pulled everything: body camera archives going back 5 years, dispatch logs, traffic stop records, use of force reports, internal complaints, personnel files, every document the department had ever filed, sealed, or buried. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. Black drivers in Ridgemont County were stopped at 6 times the rate of white drivers. 6 times. Same roads, same hours, same officers. Of those stops, 80% resulted in vehicle searches. Of those searches, hundreds and hundreds of them, fewer than 3% produced any contraband at all. The math was damning. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't one bad officer having a bad night. This was a system, built over years, maintained by silence, protected by people who knew better and chose not to act. Swanson's personnel file sat at the center of it all. 14 formal complaints over 18 years. 14. Every single one had been administratively cleared, a polite way of saying someone looked at the complaint, looked at Swanson, and decided it wasn't worth the trouble. 3 prior lawsuits had been filed against him by civilians. All 3 settled quietly. Taxpayer money. Sealed under non-disclosure agreements so tight the plaintiffs couldn't even say his name in public. The department didn't just fail to stop Swanson. They protected him. They funded his settlements. They cleared his complaints. They looked the other way for 18 years and let him do whatever he wanted on roads like Route 12. And somebody had to sign off on all of that. Sheriff Glenn Adler was subpoenaed on a Wednesday. He arrived at the federal courthouse in a Navy suit, looking like a man heading to his own funeral. His lawyer sat beside him. The lawyer looked worse. Under oath, Adler tried to distance himself, called Swanson autonomous, called the complaints personnel matters handled at the supervisory level, said he trusted his chain of command to manage day-to-day discipline. Then the prosecutors produced the emails. 46 emails over 12 years. Emails where Adler personally reviewed Swanson's complaint files. Emails where he approved the language used to dismiss those complaints. Emails where he signed off on the non-disclosure agreements. Emails where he authorized the settlement payments, $340,000 in total, all from county funds. He knew. He always knew. And now there was a paper trail that proved it. Adler resigned the following Friday. No press conference, no statement. 1-paragraph letter delivered to the county board at 7 a.m., effective immediately. By noon, the governor had appointed an interim sheriff, a retired state police commander with no ties to the department. 3 other deputies were suspended pending their own investigations. Officers who had ridden with Swanson. Officers who witnessed similar stops and said nothing. Officers who filed reports that matched Swanson's lies word for word. The county board held an emergency session. The vote was unanimous. Ridgemont County would accept a federal consent decree, placing the entire department under federal oversight for a minimum of 5 years. And the body overseeing that compliance? The National Commission on Law Enforcement Oversight, chaired by General Isaac Harper. The man whose face Swanson shoved into the mud was now the man his department answered to. The irony wasn't poetic, it was surgical. 4 months later, the trial began. Swanson was indicted on federal civil rights charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, plus state charges of assault. Federal courtroom in Richmond. Cameras from every major network in the country. The prosecution built its case on 4 unshakable pillars. First, Braddock's body camera footage. 43 minutes of unbroken video played in full for the jury. The courtroom went silent. Jurors watched Isaac cooperate at every step. Watched Swanson escalate at every turn. Watched the slap. The crack of it made one juror close her eyes. Watched Isaac's face hit the mud. Watched Swanson press his hand on the back of a man's head and push him deeper into the wet earth. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Second, Crawford's phone video. Shot from 40 yards away, but crystal clear. The wide angle captured the full scene, the empty road, the flashing lights, the absolute disproportion between a man lying motionless in the mud and an officer standing over him like he'd won something. Third, Swanson's own radio transmissions, played back for everyone to hear. Non-compliant, potentially dangerous. Every word a provable lie, contradicted by 2 separate video recordings showing the exact opposite. Fourth, the credentials. Military ID, commission badge, White House letter, all recovered from the passenger seat where Swanson had tossed them after barely looking. The prosecution held them up for the jury and said 6 words that landed like a hammer. He held the truth. He ignored it. The defense argued department training. They argued he couldn't have known. They called the situation dynamic and high stress. The prosecution's response was the moment that defined the entire trial. He didn't need to know the general's title to treat him like a human being. That's the point. Every person on that road deserved the same dignity, whether they had 4 stars or none. D.A. Patricia Nolan delivered the closing argument. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked the jury through 18 years of complaints, settlements, and silence. She showed them a system that created Dale Swanson and protected him. And she asked one question: if not now, when? The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. All counts. 10 years federal prison. Permanent ban from law enforcement in any capacity, in any state. Full forfeiture of pension. The judge called it a profound betrayal of public trust and a stain on every officer who serves with honor. Swanson stood motionless as the sentence was read, hands cuffed in front of him, eyes on the table. He didn't look up, not once. The ripples didn't stop at the courthouse doors. Within weeks, 5 other police departments across Virginia voluntarily requested commission reviews, preemptive moves to avoid becoming the next Ridgemont County. The message was clear: reform yourself, or someone else will do it for you. The state legislature introduced a bill within 60 days. They called it the Harper Act. It required independent civilian oversight boards for every county-level law enforcement agency in Virginia. Mandatory body cameras, mandatory complaint tracking, mandatory transparency. And General Isaac Harper testified before Congress. He sat at a long table in a wood-paneled hearing room in Washington, D.C. Cameras everywhere. Every seat filled. He wore a Navy suit. No uniform. No stars. Just a man telling the truth. He described what happened on Route 12. Calmly. Clearly. Without self-pity and without drama. The stop. The search. The slap. The mud. Lying face down on a country road while a man with a badge told him he belonged in the dirt. The image of him, composed, dignified, unbroken, testifying about having his face shoved into the mud by a public servant, became one of the defining images of the year. Not because of who he was, but because of what it meant for everyone who didn't have 4 stars to protect them. 6 months later, Washington, D.C., early morning. The kind of quiet that only exists before a city wakes up, when the streets are still empty and the light is soft and gray. Isaac Harper sat in his study, a room he'd built over 30 years of service. The walls told the story, commendations in dark frames, photographs with 3 different presidents, a folded American flag in a glass case on the top shelf. His bronze stars sat in a velvet-lined box on the corner of his desk, next to a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest General," a gift from Ashford that he'd never had the heart to replace. The morning sun crept through the window and landed on a letter in his hands. It was from Tyler Braddock, handwritten, 2 pages, the kind of letter a man writes when he's been carrying something heavy and finally decides to set it down. Braddock had left the Ridgemont County Sheriff's Department 3 weeks after the incident. He'd enrolled in a criminal justice reform program at the University of Virginia. He was studying oversight policy, use of force standards, community policing models, the things he wished someone had taught him before they handed him a badge and put him in a car with Dale Swanson. The letter was honest, no excuses, no self-pity. "General Harper," it read. "I stood there that night and watched a man get slapped and shoved into the mud. I didn't stop it. I want you to know that I think about that every single day. Not because I'm looking for forgiveness, I don't think I've earned that yet, but because that night changed what I believe about silence. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is a side, and I never want to be on that side again." Isaac read it twice. Then he set it down on his desk and looked out the window. He didn't think about the trial. He didn't think about the headlines or the hashtags or the Harper Act. He didn't think about the verdict or the sentence or the look on Swanson's face when the cuffs went on. He thought about something simpler, something heavier. He thought about the fact that without his title, without his stars, without Ashford's phone call, without the federal credentials in his glove box, he would have just been another black man face down in the mud on a back road in Virginia. No SUVs, no state police captain, no congressional hearing, just a man in the dirt, and an officer who'd get away with it, again. He sat with that thought for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. "Denise, what's the next county on our list?" The work continues. 200 miles south, Pastor Elaine Crawford sat on the same porch where she'd recorded the video that changed everything. A local news crew was setting up in her front yard. They'd come to do a follow-up story. 6 months later, the woman behind the video. Crawford smoothed her dress and looked into the camera with the same steady eyes she'd had that night on Route 12. "I almost didn't record," she said. "My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. I was scared. Scared of what I was seeing. Scared of what might happen if he noticed me." She paused. "But then I thought about all the times nobody recorded. All the times there was no video, no proof, no accountability. All the times someone said, 'It didn't happen like that,' and there was nothing to say otherwise." She looked down at her phone, sitting on the porch railing beside her glass of sweet tea. "My phone was the only weapon I had, and it was enough." Her church had since launched a community Know Your Rights program, free, open to anyone. They covered traffic stop procedures, recording rights, legal resources, and how to file complaints. The first session drew 40 people. The most recent one drew over 120. Crawford smiled when she talked about it. A tired smile, but a real one. "So here's my question for you, and I actually want to hear your answer in the comments. If you saw something like this happening on the side of the road, would you stop? Would you record? Or would you keep driving? Be honest, no judgment, just honesty. Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. And if this story hit you, if it made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, not for me, but so the algorithm puts this in front of more people who need to see it. If you're not subscribed yet, come on now. We do this every week. Stories that make you think, make you feel, and maybe, just maybe, make you act. Here's the thing. Isaac Harper didn't need 4 stars to deserve respect on that road. Nobody does. The badge is supposed to protect. The uniform is supposed to serve. And when it doesn't, when it becomes a weapon instead of a shield, it's on all of us to hold the line. Not just generals, not just pastors with phones. All of us. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay aware, and never, ever look away.
Let me be honest with you. A badge is not power. A uniform is not authority. Those things were created to protect people, to serve people, every single person, not just the one who look right, not just the one who drives the right car, not just the one who comes from the right zip code, everyone. But the moment someone puts on a badge and uses it to hurt instead of protect, that badge means nothing. It's just metal. And the person wearing it is more dangerous than any criminal, because a criminal breaks the law, but a person in uniform who breaks the law, they break something bigger. They break trust. And the trust is the only thing that holds everything together. And here's the part that really stays with me. As a shouldn't need 4 stars to treat it like human being on the road. Nobody should. Your safety shouldn't depend on your title. Your dignity shouldn't depend on who answers when someone calls or fold. And not just this. That's lottery. And nobody should have to win lottery just to drive home safe. So if you wear a badge, remember that's before. And if you see a badge being used as a weapon, don't look away. Because looking away is how 18 years of silence happens. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice. And remember, a badge is supposed to be shined. And the moment it becomes one, we all have a problem.